Good afternoon. My name is Armand Christian Sery-Ble, and I am the president of Smyrna Africa and Zinaza Biomedical International. Today, I'm here to speak to the entire world population because I'm asking for the resignation of the Secretary General of the United Nations and the President of the Republic of France. These are the two main reasons why I'm addressing you today. You see, I'm a national of Cote-d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, and I lived in the United States for over 23 years now. But I'm also a potential candidate to these elections, presidential elections in Cote d'Ivoire. However, my candidacy hinged on many reasons. I would elaborate only on one of them, which is also one of the important reasons why I had wanted to run for president. I had wanted to run for president because the condition in which the United Nations and the international community pushed the people of Cote d'Ivoire to go to elections was not conducive to the elections being democratic elections. So these conditions were not conducive to good and democratic elections. And I had wanted to decry this problem, which is a very serious problem. So, in light of the seriousness of the consequences of these bad elections pushed by the United Nations and by the international community onto the people of Cote d'Ivoire, in light of the consequences, I wrote to the United Nations, to the Security Council, to the American President, the Secretary of State, as well as to the U.S. Congress. I also wrote to the African Union, to the European Union, and particularly to the French President, who was heavily involved in the matter, political matter in Cote d'Ivoire, to tell them that the conditions were not conducive to transparent, credible, fair elections to be held in Cote d'Ivoire. You know, see, when you are a leader, whether you are a mayor, a firefighter, a doctor, community doctor, or a teacher, a president, or a secretary general, whether you assume any leadership position, if you are made aware of a danger against your community or against your population, you ought to do what is right to prevent that disaster from occurring. That's why we have, for instance, the Weather Channel. That's why we have the Department of State. That's why we have the security, the advisor to the president. That's why there are many structures to serve as a buffer system to prevent all types of disasters that may hinder the lives of the population. So, if you are made aware of a situation that can endanger the life of people, you ought to do what is right to prevent it. Unfortunately, the United Nations ignored my appeal to them. The international community, all the entire politicians involved in the elections in Cote d'Ivoire, they all ignored it. I wrote to them. I sent them a lot of videos, just as similar videos such as this, to tell them that it was very dangerous for the elections to be held, but they ignored it. When you are a leader and you fail to do what is right, you are liable for the consequences. In the United States and anywhere else, if someone is responsible for the death of only one person, that person can go to jail for the rest of his life. The same rule applies to presidents, to everybody else, because no one is above the law of God, nor is anyone above the law of his country. Otherwise, we will be living an unfair life. Now, some people may say that life is unfair, but that's another discussion. From the standpoint of this discourse, I would like to say that the United Nations and the entire international community they were all forewarned about the consequences that these elections may bring about. And since they did these elections, many people died. The country has been in total disarray. Many countries, many villages were destroyed. In the area of Ma, the western part of Ivory Coast, many villages lost their lives. Entire families were destroyed. Exactly what I had foreseen. And the thing that I tried to prevent actually happened because the leader failed to abide by the orders that were given. They are responsible. Since the United Nations and mainly the Security Council was at the forefront, was the main instigator, the main supporter, the main financier of these elections, the main decision makers. They are responsible for what happened in Cote-d'Ivoire, and they must be held accountable and liable for the death, the murders, and the economic and social consequences inherent to these catastrophes. Secondly, I'm asking the people of France to impeach the president of France, because he is at the origin of this terrorist invasion in my country, Cote d'Ivoire. There are many reasons, many examples that I can show to prove it. But for the purpose of this address, let me remind you that it was under the leadership of Mr. Jacques Chirac, then President of France, and the leadership of Kofi Annan, then Secretary General of the United Nations, that what happened in Rwanda happened, the genocide. They confess their sins. They confess their negligence, their lack of responsibility. They confess the fact that they didn't do the right thing to prevent the genocide in Rwanda. However, millions of people died. And since many people died, they are responsible. So, independently from the resignation of the Secretary General, I'm asking the International Tribunal, to call Mr. Kofi Annan and Mr. Jacques Chirac into account. They must appear before the judge and must be sanctioned according to the law for their actions. For the people of Cote d'Ivoire and the people of Africa in general deserve their lives. I'm asking the International Criminal Court to also bring a lawsuit against Mr. Sarkozy and against Mr. Ban Ki-moon. Mr. Ban Ki-moon recently created what can be assimilated to the Belarusgate. He made this frivolous announcement that the country of Cote d'Ivoire received some military choppers to destroy the population. He made that assertion, and he was rebuked by some diplomat at the Security Council. Later, his announcement was considered as a simple mistake. Consider for a moment that everybody believed that the government of Cote d'Ivoire, the legitimate government of Cote d'Ivoire, the government of Mr. Laurent Gbagbo, considered that that government actually broke the embargo of the United Nations against weapons. Consider that everybody believed that Mr. Gbagbo and his government violated the embargo, the UN embargo. Well, the international community would have gathered together, just as they've already positioned the African Community Army, ECOMOG, to attack Cote d'Ivoire. So they would have gathered together to attack Cote d'Ivoire. Cote d'Ivoire would have become like Iraq, just because someone lied at the United Nations. Now, since Mr. Ban Ki-moon has been caught by some diplomat, he has been rebuked by some diplomat, Mr. Ban Ki-moon must be kicked out of his position as Secretary General of the United Nations, because his action clearly demonstrates a trend of bad behavior, a behavior that has for a long time destroyed the life of so many African people. That some people get together, make a wrong assessment, make a wrongful accusation against an African leader, and the destructive machine is put in motion to destroy the population. This cannot be condoned, cannot be tolerated, cannot be supported anymore. The same thing applies to Mr. Sarkozy, who actually supported the actions of a terrorist. You know, the United Nations has many agencies. We have UNICEF, we have the World Health Organization, we have UNDP, UNEP, UNESCO. They all should work toward the betterment of life, the preservation of our civilization. Our children, African children, and the children of most developing countries cannot suffer as a result of a bad decision or a mistake made by a Secretary General or a worker or a member of the Security Council. This is a toy. The toy is made out of rubber and many other components that are brought or come from Africa. But our people do not take advantage of it. The children in Africa do not have the privilege to benefit from the fruit of their land. That's not right. Our crops and our resources are being taken away from us to make toys for babies, toys for toddlers, kids, and so forth. And our children do not benefit from it. They are rather exposed to some type of atrocities that are engineered at the United Nations. And when the perpetrators are caught, they say, oh, it was just a mistake. It is time that they pay for their mistake. because the lambda citizen of any country would be liable for his actions if he does anything and is caught by the police or by anybody. Therefore, the infraction committed by Mr. Ban Ki-moon and Mr. Sarkozy must be punished by law. No one is above the law of the land, of this country, of this world, and no one is above the word of God. People cannot position themselves to lead their country or to hold a high position in an international community and trample over the liberty and the life and the right of the youth and people of Africa. It is time that this type of behavior be sanctioned severely and that they make amend. For if I didn't tell the world about the danger and the consequences of these elections, I would have shut up. And no one probably wouldn't have been held accountable except the people of Cote-d'Ivoire. But I said that the people of Cote-d'Ivoire were forced to go to election under a very deleterious condition. They didn't have to go to election under these circumstances. They were pushed by the United Nations and by the international community. A chosen international community forced the people of Cote d'Ivoire to go to elections. Now many people have died and the lives of many people have been destroyed, and all we are getting is a simple word: it was just a mistake. No, it is not a mistake. Mr. Ban Ki-moon must be called into accountability. It has to be liable for his actions. The entire Security Council must be held accountable for their actions. The French president and his collaborators must be held accountable for their actions. And since Mr. Sarkozy has took over Mr. Chirac also must be held accountable. And since Mr. Ban Ki-moon took over Mr. Kofi Annan, Mr. Kofi Annan also must be held accountable. Because the country of Cote d'Ivoire and many African countries cannot continue to suffer from the incompetence, from the wicked decision made at the international level. We, the people of Cote d'Ivoire and the people of Africa, deserve what everybody else deserves in the United States, in Europe, everywhere else. We deserve education. And UNESCO is there for it. We deserve a good life, good health, and the World Health Organization is there for it. We deserve a better environment, and the UNEP is there for it. We deserve better development, urban development, rural development in every sector, and UNDP is there for it. We cannot be deprived of the money that is supposed to come back to us. The funds that are in the bank of the United Nations belongs to everybody in the world. But we cannot continue to suffer from the conflict and from the war and from all instabilities that are transposed to our country. The elections were held in a bad condition, and those who are responsible are the organizers. They are not the population. It's not the voters who are responsible. Those who are responsible are the organizers. Whether we are in a sporting event, a concert, I take for instance a boxing event. If the judge cannot make a final decision, he does not run into the locker of one of the boxers to make a decision there. You do not take the trophy from the champion and to go to give it to a challenger just because the fight turned into a brawl.